Why, look! It's the bastard son of the late William Kidd. Still a mere boy, and yet 10 times the demon his father was.
In order to discuss any of the prominent figures during the golden age of piracy, we need to start with someone well known. To that end, today we're going to be talking about Captain Kidd. No, not that one. This one. Captain William Kidd, one of the most notorious and controversial pirates to come out of the 18th century. William Kidd was born in Scotland in 1645, but little else is confirmed about his early life. There are several different accounts about who his father was and how his family was supported. What is known is that he eventually settled into the newly anglicized New York City. There, he befriended many prominent colonial citizens, including 3 governors. This began a pattern in his life of being a well-respected man among the nobility and government. He spent some of his earlier life sailing with pirates and doing various jobs for nobles, but there was one contract that led to a series of events that would define his career and his legacy. In 1695, King William of England replaced Benjamin Fletcher, who was governing New York at the time, with Richard Coote, the Earl of Bellomont. That same year, Bellomont called upon the trusty and well-beloved Captain Kidd for a request. He was asked to hunt down and attack anyone associated with piracy, with names including Thomas Tew, John Ireland, William Mays, and Thomas Wake. He was also expected to attack any French ships that he came across, since they were at war with Britain at the time. Should Kidd refuse the request, it would be viewed as disloyalty to the crown, the social stigma of which would have destroyed Kidd's reputation. The vast majority of the venture was paid for by some of the most powerful noble lords in England. The Earl of Orford, the Duke of Shrewsbury, and Sir John Somers are just a few of the names involved. Kidd received a letter of marque and sold his ship Antigua to afford his new vessel, the Adventure Galley. He took great pride in the ship and handpicked its crew and officers.
We like this story, Torres. And we want to help you finish it. But we're going to do it our way, using you and your gold.
September 1696. Kidd weighed anchor and made for the Cape of Good Hope. By the time he reached the coast of Madagascar, a third of his crew had perished due to cholera. The brand new ship was leaking, and worst of all, they failed to find any pirates. Not only off Madagascar, but in the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb, the entrance to the Red Sea. At this point, Kidd was becoming increasingly desperate to cover the cost of his ambitious enterprise, but he still refused to attack several merchant ships when given a chance. Because of this, some of the crew deserted, while those who stayed made constant open threats of mutiny. It's said that Kidd killed his gunner by throwing an iron bucket at his head after a heated exchange. While this was certainly not permitted in English Admiralty law, Kidd seemed convinced that he could wash himself of it. He claimed that he had good friends in England that will bring me off for that.
Bad excuse is better than none at all.
As Kidd's journey continued, rumors of his acts of piracy began to stir. In January 1698, he raised French colors and captured an Armenian ship, the 400-ton Quedagh Merchant. It was certainly not a pirate vessel, but it was acting with passes provided by the French East India Company. Kidd was reluctant to keep it, but there was a loophole he could exploit. Since he was entitled to attack French vessels, this let him justify his taking of the ship and its valuable cargo. He held on to the French passes and renamed the Quedagh Merchant the Adventure Prize. Once this news reached England, it was confirmation of Kidd's reputation as a pirate. Various navy commanders were then tasked with bringing in Kidd for his notorious piracies. By April, Kidd reached Madagascar again and ran into Robert Culliford, the same man who mutinied and stole Kidd's ship years before. There are conflicting accounts as to what actually happened in their encounter, but they agree that most of Kidd's crew abandoned him for Culliford, with only 13 remaining on the Adventure Galley. Kidd looted everything he could from the ship, then ordered it burned. He then carried on, heading back toward New York.
But wouldn't you feel, I don't know, more welcome there?
As you might feel more welcome in Paris.
Fair point.
Prior to returning home, Kidd learned that he was a wanted pirate and took precautions. The adventure prize was a marked ship, so he cached it in the Caribbean Sea and continued aboard a sloop. He also buried some of his treasure on Gardiner's Island, perhaps hoping to use it as a bargaining tool in his trial. It didn't remain there very long, however, as it was removed and subsequently used as evidence against him. One of Kidd's original investors, Richard Coote, the Earl of Bellomont, was afraid that he would also be convicted of piracy should Kidd return, so he lured Kidd back to Boston with promises of clemency, then had him arrested on July 6, 1699. After being imprisoned for over a year in mostly solitary confinement, Kidd was sent to England for questioning. The ministry had hoped to use him as a tool to discredit the investors who backed him, but Kidd refused to name names, confident that his patrons would reward his loyalty by interceding. They never did. In fact, they were embarrassed to be involved in the whole mess at all. They worked to deprive Kidd of the money and information that may have helped his legal defense. At his trial, Kidd only learned then that he had been charged with murder and was quickly found guilty of all charges. On May 23, 1701, William Kidd was hanged. His body was gibbeted over the River Thames at Tilbury Point, a warning to other potential pirates. It remained there for 3 years. Since then, historians have uncovered many things about Kidd's trial. There were many factors that, had they arisen, Kidd might have been spared. The French passes from the Quedagh Merchant only resurfaced in the 20th century, misfiled with other government papers. Ironically, it's also believed that if Kidd had given up the names of his patrons to the ministers, he may have lived. But regardless of what actually happened, Kidd's name went down in history and legend as a notorious pirate. A song was written shortly after his execution, Captain Kidd's Farewell to the Sea, or the famous Pirate's Lament. It helped popularize the belief that Kidd confessed to the charges. It also referenced Kidd's buried treasure, which is likely where that myth was made common as well. His legacy, whether it be earned or not, has been referenced and studied for hundreds of years. Even now, his name is still synonymous with piracy, and while he may not actually appear in Black Flag, he's still one of the most important people to emerge from the era. That said, I think it's time we take a look at someone a little less infamous, but we'll do that next time.